Stella Sora is a garbage game. See? Not sponsored. I think the case of Stella Sora teaches us one thing, that people tend to look at the first headline they see and immediately jump to conclusions. It seems like there's almost always a catch to whenever something good gets released these days. Originally announced as a casual isometric brawler with roguelike gameplay, Stella Sora has been on quite the roller coaster the week it launched. What was supposed to be an alternative to the cute and funny art style that everyone loves in gacha gaming had some great gameplay innovations at the cost of its reputation. My name is Psyche, and after playing for a week, I want to explore aspects of the game that I liked, some I didn't like, as I do believe that people are valid to call out certain greedy changes made to the game. Ultimately though, I believe that Stella Sora happens to be the victim of an infamous internet phenomenon called shoot first, ask questions second. Let's get started. Stella Sora is developed and published by Yostar, the one and only that published huge gacha hits like Arknights, Azur Lane, and the JP server for Blue Archive. I believe this happens to be the first major title that they've self-developed and published so far, so let's see how well they did. Now, if it's not obvious enough, this game is meant to target the fanbase that's into that word that starts with a C and ends with a Y. However, it's not exactly accurate to call it a Blue Archive competitor when you consider that the same company owns a major share of its publishing rights. The story follows the Tyrant, a mysterious person suffering from amnesia that a small band of adventurers called Trekkers rescued out of a monolith. I would say the story is just casual enough to make sense, though if you're looking for the next Arknights, you're definitely not going to be finding the writing to be that level. Anyways, I'm going to start by going over the parts that I quite liked. The gameplay. You bring 3 Trekkers into a level, with one of them being the on-field main while the other 2 play support. You have to move within range of the enemy to perform an auto attack, and the range depends on the weapon the Trekker is using. There's a skill and ult that you can use on cooldown, and your other 2 support Trekkers can occasionally assist too. There's a set of stages you have to go through consecutively in the roguelike dungeon mode. Upon leveling up, you'll pick one of 3 buffs to apply to that run. Once the run is complete, your team and buff loadout will be recorded and saved. When you go to the farming stages and other modes, you have to select one of the loadouts from a previous dungeon run, then use it to clear the stage, which will just be its own individual boss fight usually. The gameplay is sort of reminiscent of Hades, which I put quite a lot of hours into back in my days playing roguelikes. I think this style of gameplay is actually pretty unique in gacha games. While there are some drawbacks and design limitations due to Stella Sora being a gacha, I think by itself, it has a lot of potential. It just depends where they go with it, provided the game actually continues development. In a traditional roguelike, there are some out there that don't have any restrictions on damage scaling or what kind of items you can get. Think Noida or Binding of Isaac. If you got lucky enough to get a combo that literally one-shots every enemy in the game, then no one really questions it. The developer doesn't care if you break the game. They already made the money you spent to buy the game. However, when a roguelike game mode is in a gacha game, then the developers must ensure that there's no combo that's so overpowered it breaks the game. They gotta sell new characters and weapons to you after all. Even so, there are a handful of single-player roguelikes like Hades that have a lot of build variety, but they don't let you build something so broken you one-shot everything. I felt like the gameplay of Stella Sora is where the potential lies, and the way you can save your team loadouts is pretty creative too. However, a fair critique that can be said is that since each run offers a range of buffs, then it becomes unclear how much of your success in that run was contributed by your vertical investments in leveling characters and discs, or it was just the buffs within that run. There are musical note currencies that unlock certain passives when you collect enough of certain ones. These are determined by the discs you've equipped, and these are also factored into the final power rating for that run. There is an auto battle feature in the game where your skills will just get used immediately off cooldown, though the AI isn't intelligent enough to know how to dodge attacks. You do get iframes when dodging and using your ult, so it can lead to some tense moments where you can overcome a powerful enemy in the run with some nice dodging skills. I do think sometimes it doesn't exactly matter, since there's bullets littering your entire screen, then you're gonna be taking some hits no matter what. Still, if you wanted something casual to turn your brain off, the game even recommends buffs for you to pick, though typically it sorta just picks randomly, and it's usually way better if you learn the character and decide for yourself. I did manage to build a few teams, and something I found is that the game seems to encourage mono-element teams, as a lot of the support passives and buffs tend to buff the same element their characters have. Of course, some enemies are weaker or resistant to certain elements, so you do have to consider that. It's kind of a one-dimensional system, but hey, I suppose gacha games are meant to be casual friendly. Surprisingly, you can actually unlock the harder ascension stages rather early. So if you wanted to, you can go in with an underlevel team to see how well you perform. When I tried this, it actually felt like the game was challenging enough that you have to learn the boss attack patterns, since the damage they deal is no longer just the light scratch. So, if you are good enough, you can beat some of the higher stages under-leveled. There are also numerous challenge game modes, including weekly boss stages for rare leveling materials, an endless arena where you have to defeat all enemies within the time limit, the main Ascension mode where the core roguelike mode takes place. By the way, with these tokens, you can actually just skip a run while only selecting the buffs you want. You have to have beaten the run at least once to unlock this though. The Ascension roguelike mode does have its own meta progression system. There's the Vampire Survivors sub-mode, where you have to survive for long enough picking up the orbs that the enemies drop to upgrade your run, then beat the final boss enemy in a set time to win. This mode also has its own meta progression track and dedicated shop. Despite seeming to focus on having players build mono-element teams, I can see how different characters and builds can be more suited for single target or clearing crowds. For example, the 3 emblem farming stages will give you tokens for decreasing the cooldown for your skill or ult, meaning that you'll want to have a build suited for that playstyle to have the best chance of succeeding. Finally, the true endgame mode where you have to lock in 2 teams to beat a score attack of 2 different bosses, and you're ranked based on your damage performance, with a leaderboard and gacha tokens giving out for scoring higher. So as you can see, even at launch, you are getting quite a lot of content. The gameplay loop is actually some of the more engaging of experience in a gacha game. While time-gated content does exist, the game will still give a lot of leg room if you want to head into challenging content early. If the game continues development, I think the combat system has a lot of ways it can develop. It just depends on where they go with it. Progression is as typical as it gets. Characters need leveling and ascending. Their discs need leveling and ascending. Their skills need leveling. A dupe system that allows for 5 additional copies, though there's a caveat to this I'll explain when I get to the gacha section. You also get a cool new art for the character when you reach a certain level. Each of the discs actually contains their own music track, and the genre can vary quite a bit. Pretty cool detail if you ask me. Using stamina, you can use your previously saved loadouts to farm for different materials, with the sweep feature unlocking after you beat it once with 3 stars, where you can just spend all stamina with the press of a button. However, the rate in which you get materials also seems to be rather slow, as it took me an entire tank of stamina just to ascend one character past level 20. This happened to be one of the game's major criticisms at launch. Though dare I say, I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. When you complete the beginner missions, you get these boxes that let you substitute a resource to use. As it turns out, while only having completed half the missions, I have like hundreds and in a few cases over 1,000 of these things lying around. You can easily level a few teams effectively with this. If this wasn't here, then yeah, I'd absolutely bash the game for its stinginess. But I mean, stingy stamina game sucks, am I right? Well, yes, if you ignore all the stamina soda cans given out to you, like these. People say that the honeymoon phase for the game dries up too quickly, except I just don't really see where that argument is coming from. The core gameplay loop basically has you investing in a good team, then climbing the Ascension roguelike mode to fish for better buffs, then using that team loadout in other challenge modes. When you're able to physically see how far you're getting, the feeling is actually pretty good. The one thing they've nailed is the amount of variety you can have in your builds. You can focus on the character's ult ability, or their skill, or auto attack. I found that even with 3 different runs, I could churn out different builds that I can see how each of them is more suited for different level types. I predict that what will inevitably happen is that once you're in the late game, the roguelike mode stops being a pastime to see how far you can get, but rather just another process to fish for the perfect buffs you want. Honestly, that's perfectly fine, because you can just skip the run completely and just pick your desired buffs. As for the RNG relic system, it's actually pretty tame. When a trekker reaches levels 70, 80, and 90, you unlock one of their emblems. You have to farm for the materials for the emblems in their respective mode, and once you get 10 of those, the emblem will appear with 4 substats. You can then use more of the emblem currency to reroll set stats or lock certain ones, though it will take another currency. You do this 3 times for each trekker. Honestly, this feels rather hands-off. You have to consider, you just need 1 currency to manage the emblems. You don't have to worry about set bonuses, so these are simple stat increases on top of what you have. It reminds me a bit of Nikkei's overload gear, so most of your farming will be allocated to other portions of character upgrades instead. The emblem system really is not bad at all. You can also raise trekker affinity by giving them gifts or achieving certain milestones. There's some invite events that's sort of copy-pasted, but whatever. When you get their affinity to 10, you get a short animated cutscene CG that you can set to your wallpaper. I imagine this is what a lot of players will be looking forward to. I found the core gameplay loop to tie itself to progression in a lot of ways. There's enough build variety to play even the 4 stars in multiple methods. The other challenge game modes are actually pretty fun and unlock rather early, and they do tend to let you push to test your limits. Before I talk about monetization, I would like to address something very quickly. The gacha system is stingy. I absolutely agree with this sentiment. There's no gacha company under the sun that's not driven by the profit motive. I will say this again and again. These companies are not your friends. You can like the game for what it is, but your relationship with these companies is purely transactional. Believe me, I love talking smack about the greediness of gacha companies, and this one is no exception. This is easily where the bulk of the problem with the game lies and where my critiques stand. However, I would like to make clear distinctions of what I think is worthy of criticizing and what's not. So let's talk about the gacha. How do we acquire more cute and funny characters? Through everyone's favorite portion of a gacha game. One poll costs 300 crystals. The base chance for a 5-star is 2%, so fairly average if you ask me. The rate up is a 50-50 at a 1% base chance. The pity is at 160 pulls for the rate up. While not directly explicitly stated, this means that the game has no second rate up guarantee, so you could lose the 50-50 over and over until you get to 160. For the feature banners, there is a one-time pity counter that's separate from the usual, where cumulatively, pulling 120 times on the banner will give you a copy of the 5-star. It's basically like reverse 1999 system for collabs and limited units, but you can claim multiple ones if you cumulatively pull enough on the banner. This means if you're an average player looking to just get one copy of the character, you'll need 36,000 crystals ready at the time of the banner's release, enough for 120 pulls. How impactful are dupes and signature discs? I don't know. Will any characters transition to the standard pool? I presume so, just that it doesn't happen right away. The wording is a little bit ambiguous, but since it says that it will not be immediately added, my assumption is that it will be added, just at an indefinite point in time. What about if the normal pity counter carries over across banners? I don't know, but I sure hope so. I also almost forgot to cover the 4 stars. Usually 4 stars in a gacha game will never reach the potential of a 5-star, or it's just hyper dupe heavy to reach that level. Obviously, gacha games need to show off the powers of their most coveted characters, and there's a financial incentive to make the 4 stars weaker, since there's no point of you pulling for SSRs if you can easily sweep every stage with the 4 stars. The dupe system for them also work a little differently. Each of their dupe levels requires 60 of that character's shards to unlock. While you do get 60 when you pull a 5-star additional times, you only get 30 for 4 stars. This means you have to pull more than 5 additional copies to max them out. I don't really know why this had to be the case, but hey, more power to whales, I guess. And no, I did not see a way to increase the dupe level in other ways aside from the gacha. There's the disc spanners as well, because of course there is. 5-star rate up chance is 75% with a pity at 120 pulls. I'm gonna be honest, I very rarely pull for weapons in gacha games that have them. It's kinda just a turnoff for me at this point. But yes, there is a weapon banner type in the game. The currency that the weapon banner uses is also different. The cost per pull is still 300 of it, and you can convert them from the premium gacha currency at a 1-to-1 ratio. Why is it designed this way? That's due to pulling on the character banner giving a small rebate of 30 disc tokens per pull, so you get 1 pull for every multi you perform on the character gacha. If that was the entire case with the gacha system, I'd honestly just call it average and move on. However, there is a major problem here. The game is just really stingy for some reason. You get 100 crystals for completing dailies, which is a third of a pull. You get 100 crystals for logging in per month, which is again a third of a pull. Moving on to the other monetization methods, the $5 30-day supply pass only gives 3,300 crystals in total, which is actually only enough for a multi. To my understanding, the beta version of the game had the economy at a more generous state, and the rate up chance was 60%. And I don't know why they changed it. It's certainly not as enticing as a 100% rate up, but 60% is more tolerable than a 50%. This again reinforces that no one likes it when something gets taken away from them, and this happens to be a deal breaker for a lot of players. Whether or not this gets changed at some point is anyone's guess. However, I would also like to point out that in the beta version, the base chance for a 5-star was 1.6%, which was raised to 2% in the launch version, at the cost of the rate up chance lowering to 50%. However, if you calculate it, this means that the rate up chance is actually ever so slightly higher at 1% versus the beta's 0.96%. Though obviously, to my knowledge, doubling the amount of crystals needed per pull is not a good look. The cash shop has your typical whale bait, nothing out of the ordinary, though just a quick mention, the battle pass does provide a new skin for Manova. One problem: While it changes the character portrait, the 3D model still uses the default model. I thought, this has to be some kind of mistake. When you buy a premium skin in a gacha where the in-game models are 3D, then you want to see the goods, know what I'm saying? I hope this gets fixed, because in my opinion, this is borderline hinging on the skin system being a scam. There was a news announcement for a summer skin, and that one does seem to have a 3D model. However, I believe the stingy economy is the core problem of where all the controversy lies. It's not even that it's that stingy. If there was no beta test version and everyone was greeted with the way things are at now, then most would have just grumbled and kept on playing or moved on. The problem is that people know there's a version of the game that was more generous. They did announce an event to give out like 10,000 more crystals in the next week. The issue here is that it doesn't solve the core problem, which is that the income for crystals is not predictable enough. If they choose to give out a good portion of rewards as event participation, you might be able to accumulate a lot of pulls, except that would mean the developer is in more control of how much they want to give out. I think a statement to players will go a long way in dispelling the confusion and uncertainty, as this whole stingy gacha economy is the root of the issue that has allowed itself to propagate across the community. The problem is that when the general populace sees something negatively, they tend to dig up other allegations and more reasons to affirm their negative feelings. Kinda unrelated, but take an example of the whole pirate software situation. Originally, people called him out on a stance against the Stop Killing Games movement, which made people look back on his career and previous controversies, picking apart all the flaws and mistakes he had. Except when all of these events had already happened, it never reached the mainstream population. My question is, if all of these horrible things have been happening for years, why are you talking about it now? When Stella Sora launched, sure enough, people made other allegations about the stamina system being too stingy and your upgrades being too slow, or in some cases even throwing negative speculations on the company that made the game. Again, if all of these things have been happening in the beta version, or how the company has been handling their properties have been mismanaged, why are you talking about it now? Is it because it's currently a period in time where it's acceptable to see the game in a negative light, so people tend to witch hunt for other ways to affirm their feelings about the subject? For example, when you saw the title of this video, you might have thought that the whole video would just be me glazing the game with overwhelmingly positive comments. Yet defending something doesn't explicitly mean I'm 100% in favor of it now, does it? In today's age of the internet, there's an all-or-nothing mentality when it comes to having an opinion on things. You're either with us or against us. Nuance doesn't exist. You see the first popular post about the game and immediately set it as your opinion of the game. The gameplay loop feels polished and contains a lot of variety? Well, the post I saw complaining about the game never mentioned that, so it doesn't matter. The character designs and artwork are all pretty good, with every disc in the game having their own dedicated soundtrack? Nah, gacha's still stingy. Game sucks. How there's a lot of built-in quality of life and diverse challenge content at launch, not to mention you can unlock them rather early? Nope, doesn't exist. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that there's nothing else to critique about the game, despite having an impressive catalog of games being published, and while the overall presentation is good, I was sorta expecting a bit more. The main story is partially voice acted in Chinese and Japanese, though not all of it is. There are a few animated voice cutscenes where all the budget went, but those tend to be rare. So what would I do to fix the problem? Well, I'm gonna be honest. I will release a statement to players explaining what's going on, then I'll make the cost per pull to 200 or something. And also give out a rebate for players that did spend more gacha currency. As long as you address this one central problem, which is that the gacha system is too stingy and it has no predictable income, then all the other complaints and problems will disappear. Because the switch has been flipped and it's no longer popular to complain about the game. I'm gonna be reviewing Chaos Zero Nightmare in a week or so, and it's honestly kinda jarring to see people mostly fine with that despite having some pretty stingy practices as well. I'm looking forward to reviewing that. So in the end, do I recommend playing Stella Sora? Yes. I think the game has one of the more unique and engaging concepts I've seen in a gacha game in recent memory. The game has a clear creative identity that's able to fill, and it feels rather feature-rich at launch. There's a variety of builds you can do even with the 4-star characters, and ways to challenge yourself using knowledge of the game mechanics. Do I recommend spending money on it? Not now. I would wait a little bit longer to see if there's going to be any statements or responses that addresses the issue. I think the game is one of the more fresh experiences I've had where it faced the unfortunate barrage of internet witch hunting. We live in an age where the state of the internet can cause a simple corporate decision to completely turn its reputation around. Only time will tell if there will be a point where there will be less complaining and more people spamming sobbing emojis. This has been my honest, unsponsored opinions on Stella Sora, so let me know what you think. If you want to catch more gacha-related analysis or reviews just like this, you know what to do. For those that want to go the extra mile, you can support me for what I do for as little as $2 a month on Patreon. For less formal and more opinionated videos on the same topics, feel free to follow me on my second channel. Once again, thank you for watching, and as always, be sure to spend moderately and have fun out there.